think while it's still legal. The Kate Daly Show starts now.
So let's go back to Iran here for a moment. Now the leadership has admitted that thousands of people were killed in the bloody crackdown on protesters in the streets of Iran. Some estimates by human rights organizations, some of the activists say that they believe the number is north of 12,000. The Ayatollah blaming the United States and calling President Trump a criminal.
Later this week, President Trump is set to hold a signing ceremony in Davos, Switzerland for the Board of Peace. This event is scheduled to take place on Thursday morning and will mark the transition into phase 2 of the Gaza ceasefire deal. Around 60 invitations were sent out, mostly to leaders of foreign countries. Countries like Canada and Argentina have already agreed to join. Others, including Russia, are reviewing the invitation, and France has rejected the offer from President Trump. The president responded last night.
Giving a response to President Macron saying he will not join the Board of Peace.
Did he say that? Well, nobody wants him because he's going to be out of office very soon. So, that's all right.
Erica Kirk is demanding a speedy trial in the case against her husband's accused killer, Tyler Robinson, after she claims his defense team is delaying proceedings. The new filing from Erica Kirk's attorney reads in part, quote, "Nobody believed in the importance of the United States Constitution more than Charlie Kirk. And although the United States Constitution guarantees criminal defendants many rights, it does not guarantee them the right to cause undue delay in the criminal justice process." This follows Friday's hearing on a defense motion to disqualify the prosecution team for conflict of interest after they argue one of the prosecutor's children was present when Charlie Kirk was assassinated.
All righty. Welcome. There's a lot to unpack in those 3 clips. Trust me on that one. But first, I have a special treat for you. And Dr. Lee Merritt is with me. And Dr. Lee Merritt is always one of the frontline doctors. Of course, had her on the show so many times. Always appreciate her take on things and just want to hear what she's up to, what she's lately, what her latest research is, because it's always intriguing. I promised you that. And Dr. Lee Merritt, welcome. How are you?
Well, thanks very much. Well, I'm busy. I'm up against the book deadline, so I'm kind of scrunched.
Do you want to let people know what you're up to in that department?
Well, sure. I'm hoping to get this book out soon. It's really about escaping the medical system that we're in.
Yeah.
And how we get out. And I'll just tell you that the reason it's taken me so long is every time I look at anything, it turns out to be a pack of lies, and it's hard. And then I have to try and package it in a way that people will understand this is actually not true. I mean, it's just amazing what I found. I mean, like, the people, I personally think the people that we're dealing with are all these old families. They're all eugenicists. It goes way back. The philosophy goes way back to Plato. They've always been worried about overpopulation. That's what the Club of Rome's all about. And Bill Gates always gets mentioned, but it's not just him. I mean, this has been if you look at it, there's certain families assigned to certain parts of this, and like the Planned Parenthood part and different things.
Oh, it's why they lied about the population. It's why they lied in the late 1800s about the world population was to increase the eugenics movement.
Right. It is eugenics. And it's not just about the numbers of people. They want to be able to select who goes on and who dies. They don't want they don't want certain people. But what I discovered in the process of this, here's an example of one of the things I discovered. And it sounds crazy to spend a year on this, but I've spent a year on this, is that to make eugenics work, they needed to have a science behind it. And that's what all of what we're dealing with is false science. It's been created to make us believe the world is a certain way that it isn't. And for eugenics, the science was evolution, was Darwin's theory. So I decided, I already found John Franklin Enders, who's the guy that first claimed he cultured viruses. That was a fraud. So I said, wonder about Darwin. Well, it turns out what most people don't know. I mean, I don't know if this is something you guys would be interested in.
Of course.
I was fascinated to discover that, what do we hear about Darwin? That he was a botanist or a naturalist, and he was put on a ship to go, and he spent all his time, months and months in the Galapagos. He saw all these rare animals, and he came up with these theories and blah, blah, blah. Well, but the truth is none of this is true. And one of my favorite stories here is that Darwin has no scientific background. He was a terrible student from the time he was a child. He couldn't make it in medical school. He came from a family of very famous physicians. His grandfather was offered the role of physician to the king. And so he was big money, big family money, big famous families. And he couldn't make it to medical school. So his father sent him at some point to France said, just get enough basic education that I can maybe get you a degree somewhere. And he did that and came back, and he ended up in Cambridge, Christ Church in Oxford. And he didn't study science. He got a degree in theology.
Right.
But while he was there, this is the funniest part of the story, while he was there, and this is his only claim to fame with rare animals, as far as I know. I think the whole Galapagos thing's a fraud. But the one thing he did when he was in Cambridge, he and his upper crust buddies, he was a very big party person apparently, and they made a club. It was and they played cards. It was called the Gluttony Club, and every week they would get together, play cards, and eat rare animals. I'm not making this up. That's his only claim to fame about rare animals.
Okay. Oh my God.
But when I went further, I said, well, okay, how do this guy's a fraud. The whole thing about how he got to be on the ship, everything's a fraud. But here's the most interesting part.
Okay.
I was in the Navy. My husband was in the Navy. So I asked my husband one time, I said, while I was looking at this, I got the Admiralty records of the deck logs of the Beagle. They claim he sailed on the HMS Beagle and that he went around South America, and it was a big long cruise, but he went in the process, they were surveying the Galapagos, and he was there. And so he went aboard and surveyed and did all this research on these animals.
Okay.
Well, so then with the deck logs, there's you can write most of the stuff that we read has been written after the fact, even his own book. Okay. And so but what's really not able to be jigged is the deck logs. That's the every day they tell exactly where the ship is, how it was sailing or how it was anchored, where it was, how long it was there. So I got the deck logs for the Beagle, and I looked at every day when from that part of South America through the Galapagos, and I don't think he was even there. He is not mentioned in the deck logs. Yeah. Even the lowest midshipman Chaffers, he went aboard the island to pick up this guy that was a marooned American sailor. They named the sailor, they named Chaffers. Every time anybody of some rank went aboard the islands, they told you that they were going and how they went. Now, here's a guy that's not royalty, but he's in a family that's very close to the royal family. Are you telling me they didn't mention him once when he went aboard the island?
You're right.
Yeah, that by itself should be a big red flag.
Sure.
Then I looked at the idea that he was there for months. It turns out not to be true. I can't remember the exact dates in my head right now, but he was there. The ship was there in the Galapagos less than 5 weeks. Okay. And when you look, they were a survey ship. They were sailing around these islands. So they weren't really always mooring and stopping places. But in any case, this was primitive. There were no docks and things. So the ship had to either anchor or moor out on a buoy away from the land. To get on the island, you'd have to lower a little boat from the davits and row ashore, or they'd have a tiny sailboat. They'd sail ashore, whatever. It took time to get off the ship.
Right.
At the best, I asked my husband, I said, at the best, if you a modern Navy ship in Hong Kong, how long does it take you once you dock to get off the ship? He said, at least 30 minutes. Well, so I've got to figure it's been at least an hour, and that's probably an underestimate. So I figured out exactly the times they said they sent boats to the islands, and how many times on these Galapagos Islands, how many hours of daylight Darwin actually had to do research. It turns out at the most, and them being generous, at the most, it was 96 hours. 96 hours.
Wow.
Now, and that's not counting, going to the bathroom, eating, finding any specimens. Okay. We see these it's funny to read the narratives because you see these great narratives and it shows Darwin sitting on a rock surrounded by all these rare animals, like they came to him to be examined. That isn't the way it works. If anybody's done field work in biology, it takes a long time to even find the specimens. So this is a complete fraud. There's no way he could have done what he was doing. And so, and then it turns out there are a lot of suicides around this. 3 captains of the Beagle died.
Okay.
And so one of them was the Captain Fitzroy. He was a real scientist. He was considered the premier scientist of the British Navy at the time. And he was a young guy, though, that was given this. The captain before him was relieved after he had taken over for a dead captain.
Mm-hmm.
So the guy that should have been the captain of the ship was relieved. Doesn't say for cause. They put Fitzroy in here. Now Fitzroy had some royal lineage. I suspect he was a young naval officer, and he took the opportunity, and then he later regretted it because he got stuck in a fraud. And I think what happened is that, and this is why it's kind of important, because later, when they finally got to shore,
Mm-hmm.
Fitzroy wrote a book. He wrote 4 volumes on the voyage, and it came out very rapidly. Darwin's book didn't come out until 20 years later. And it was, so anybody could have written it.
Yeah.
It turns out that all the theories that he has in the book about evolution were already formed by previous people along the way in these lineage of elite families that want this theory out there. He didn't come up with any of it. He didn't even come up with the survival of the fittest comment. That, a lot of these we attribute to him. But here's why it matters, because this is an example of falsifying science just way back when, so that it comes forward today and can be used for something else. The picture of those birds' beaks that you always see, that every time you see him, his claim to fame is that he saw these finches, and he realized the finches' beaks were adapting to the environment because their food source had changed, their beaks are changing, and it was inherited down the generations. How do you make that comment if you've only been there for 15 days or something, 96 hours? You couldn't have observed that, okay? How do biologists today buy this? And the answer is, what's wrong with so much science today is that they didn't go back and check the primary source. And here's the funny thing. And is it by accident? No, it can't be. Here's the primary source is from Darwin's field book. There were 15 books that were theoretically his, but the one book from Galapagos went missing from somewhere. You can't even determine where the thing was stored, because before this happened, it was always said it was stored at this historical, at his old house that was called the Down House, that became a historical museum of Darwin things.
Okay.
That's where the book was stored. But then somewhere around in the 1980s, the book went missing. Only the book from the Galapagos went missing. All the rest of South American notebooks didn't get lost, but this one got lost somewhere in the 80s, and it was not reported for 20 years. So, this is this is the only primary source we have of any of his research. In other words, if I want to know if you did the question we should be asking in science these days is, was the research really done, the way they said it was done, and do you have proof of that?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer here is, the book was missing for 20 years. Here's the most critical book of this huge history that changed biology forever. And yet it's missing, and nobody reports it. And then when they reported it about 2020, it gets in the newspaper, and then miraculously the book reappears in a little, now it's at the Oxford Library, and the story changes, that it was always at the Oxford Library. And it goes to the librarian, and it says, "Happy Easter, X." And here's the book coming back, right?
Oh, wow.
But the book doesn't look the same as it did before.
Yeah.
It looks newer. And here's the key. Those birds' beaks, and none of these drawings were in there. There were only 2 drawings in the book. And one of them is a couple hills. I mean, you look at this book and you say, this is not even written by a scientist, let alone, somebody that's astute. I mean, this is like a 6th grader wrote this. It's all scribbled. It's just a nightmare. But there are only 2 drawings. One is a couple hills with some scribbles, and another one is this, which it's hard to describe so that you can see the picture. But anytime you look at Darwin, you see this drawing, and it looks like a couple lines with radian lines going out from it, kind of like a dandelion. Okay, it's like several lines going out. Now here's the key point. This is why I know it's absolute fraud. And I suspect the book never would have, this would never have been picked up, and that book never would have been returned had it not gotten into the news and been a police investigation. It probably would have sat in some wealthy person's library, just tucked away, so nobody knew the truth about what he really did on the Galapagos.
Right.
But that picture is supposed to be, and he wrote, and it's cute, on the above that says, "I think," right above that picture.
Okay.
Well, theoretically, this is his thinking about evolution. But you see, in the 1850s, right, when he was writing his book, and when they got back in the 30s, there wasn't any thought about this. But the first evolutionary ideas were the tree of life. And that's what we studied in school. I mean, this went on into the 1960s and 70s and 80s. And it was started out with a single-celled organism that was the trunk of the tree. And then you branched into animals and plants, and then it branched and it branched. So it looked like a tree, right? But as now, after the genome projects and after we can sequence the genome in animals and plants, it doesn't look anything like that. Guess what it looks like? It looks like the new picture in Darwin's book. That picture that now shows up in this newfound edition of his book. So I think somebody kept the book, and I think it was jigged to be not to make him not look so bad. I think there's a lot of, it was never, they were supposed to be indelible, but there's a lot of erasing and stuff going on. And I think they changed the book to make him in compliance with what we know now.
Well,
you see, there's real fraud.
Yeah.
There's real fraud going on here. And it's not just him. It's like every time you turn around, whether you're looking at smallpox or you're looking at rabies or you're looking at whatever you're looking at, we're being poisoned with aluminum and fluoride, and you can't tell me they didn't know about that. We have evidence that they knew about this way back, and yet they're putting it in our kids' vaccines. There's a big fight today about the vaccines. Well, no vaccine is safe. I mean, it's unbelievable. So all of this stuff goes together. If you falsify science, this is kind of like, I don't play golf, but my friends who play golf say, you know, if you hit the ball wrong a little bit off the green, then by the time you get down the fairway, it's way off. Okay. Yeah. It can be way off because it magnifies. Well, if you jig science in the 1800s just a little bit, then as going forward, it changes it a lot. And that's what we're seeing. And that's what that Darwin is so important, and these other things are so important because they've been this isn't accidental. This isn't just misunderstood lyrics or, you know, bad thinking by a couple scientists. This is a program of jigging science.
Well, I'm not going to disagree. Back in 2019 in March, I did a show on this, and it was from a piece by Jonathan Wells called Why Darwinism is False. And it went through kind of the same things you're talking about, but you actually did a bigger deep dive on the common sense logic part of Darwin and how he would have done this because he couldn't have. Anyways, all of these things that you're saying. So I love that you're adding to this conversation because when we can pick apart what's at the root of what we see as true as we go through the public education system, then good. Let's poke holes in all of it. Because I also love you're taking the epidemics and putting up against war. Will you talk about that?
Well, yeah, you know, so as you know, when I came into COVID time, the age of COVID, I still believed in viruses. And then I started hearing Thomas Cowan and Andy Kaufman, who's famous, you know, and looked at, and so I said, you know, okay, I'm with you guys. Now I got to think about what this all means. So I decided, I spent like 2 years just studying that. And I put out, in fact, I have a Rumble series. It's 5 parts. A 6th part's going to come out when I finally finish the book here. But it's about 5. It goes through every aspect of the proof, non-proof of viruses. So from why the electron microscope doesn't show you pictures of viruses, the whole bit, everything I could find to put out. Not my original research on this, but just putting it all together. But I realized that part of the problem is some of this is highly technical, and it's hard to wrap your head around and to make it to people that are not living their life in science. So what I've tried to do is personalize, figure it out who did this stuff and how did they do it in a, you know, if they're false, then you've got to rethink the whole thing. Right. And so for one of the chapters I have is on smallpox. And I know you've talked about smallpox and things, but if there are no viruses, what's smallpox? I used to think that was the one vaccine that might make sense, you know, because when I was in the military, we were concerned about that. Sure. But it turns out none of the stuff we were told about smallpox is right either. You know, we're told George Washington had it at Valley Forge and there was an epidemic in America. No. It turns out every epidemic, he actually got smallpox as a child when he went to some island in the Caribbean where there was sugar being grown and no food. So he was in a semi-starvation state. Smallpox in a nutshell is probably people that are in a semi-starvation state don't get enough potassium. You need potassium to turn on the systems that allow your immune system to get rid of toxins.
Okay.
And so the reason the milkmaids didn't get it, Jenner is the chapters about Jenner. He's a fraud too. He was funded by the government. It's just the same play over and over again.
Yep.
But the whole point is the milkmaids didn't get so sick because they actually were drinking the milk. Okay. Now, the idea, by the way, that milkmaids were getting these little pustules from the cows and it was cowpox. The whole theory is, and it's still in medicine, you'll still hear, oh yeah, it's cowpox is less virulent. So we give you cowpox to prevent you from getting smallpox. That's the theory that we're using this stuff.
We've talked about this. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. But there's no cowpox virus. There's no such disease as cowpox. Because bulls don't get it, young heifers don't get it, and steers don't get it. It's only the cows being milked by the pustular hands of the milkmaids. They were giving it. So then I looked at the veterinarians. I said, I wonder if they know this. And yes, they do, because they call it pseudo cowpox. They admit there's no cowpox. It's pseudo cowpox. And they call it milkmaids nodules. So they know the milkmaids were giving it to the cows. That alone should have shut down the whole story of smallpox and cowpox. Right. But what's making the people sick? Well, it's a semi-starvation. But then I said, well, why are they semi-starved? And they have all these reasons. They say, oh, it was the Maunder minimum, it was cold weather, volcanoes were erupting, and so the food contracted, and that's why. Well, I looked at all those dates of all those volcanoes, the Icelandic one, the one in South America. Nothing actually fits all the epidemics because there aren't that many really big smallpox epidemics, as it turns out. So I looked at every one and I looked at what was happening.
Okay.
The common thread is not the temperature. It is not anything else. It is war. It's war. Because I said, what war? What else can cause you to not have a food supply? Well, let's take the example of Cortez. What's the story? Cortez and the Spaniards show up in South America. They've had smallpox, so they're immune, but they're carrying this dreaded virus, and they give it to the natives there, the Aztecs and Mayans and whatever, and then they all get sick, and thousands and maybe millions of them die.
Okay.
Well, but that isn't what happened. I mean, if there's no virus, they're not carrying something. And by the way, if that were the story, why is it that Europeans could come to the colonies when people in the colonies had never had an outbreak, but they weren't getting sick? Why is it that the British soldiers? Why is it the British soldiers in India, at a time that there were no smallpox vaccines really, but they weren't getting sick? It was the native Indians that were getting sick around them, but the British were well nourished. They weren't getting sick, right?
Okay.
So there's got to be something. So what happened is Cortez didn't just step ashore and then smoke the peace pipe with the Aztecs, right? He had to fight them. He had to wage war on them. And who does that? Well, it's your young male warriors. What do they also do? They're the hunters. They're the people that get the food for the tribe. So they're engaged in war, and they're not tending to feeding people. And they when you lose those guys, when they get killed, you don't have anybody to feed you, and there was starvation. And that happened. Another prime example of that is the Iroquois in the 1650s, roughly 1640s, around the Great Lakes. They've been interacting with Europeans for a long time, and they weren't getting sick. But as enough of the Europeans came over into the Canada side of the equation, it drove one of the. So this was when there was the Confederation of the Iroquois tribes. It was like, I can't remember how many there were, but they had a long-standing peace agreement that had held for almost 500 years.
Okay.
And there were 120,000 Iroquois. But as this happened, the northern tribes were displaced from their hunting grounds. So they fought with the tribes below them, and then they moved down. It was a domino effect coming down, and everybody got displaced. And when you get displaced and you're not hunting, you starve. And they went from 120,000 to 20,000. Every one of these episodes is surrounding war. The 100 Years' War, the 7 Years' War in Europe. Wow. I mean, it's all war based.
That is huge.
It doesn't necessarily. It happens it doesn't happen immediately at the start of the war, but as the war drags on, and you're not farming, and your young men are going off to war, not farming, and your food crop diminishes, that's when it happens.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah.
What an insight!
Yeah.
I hadn't even paralleled
I think that really
the two.
is true.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah.
I'm just sitting thinking about that. Interesting. Okay. Huh.
The pandemic of 1918 wasn't the pandemic of a virus. It was a pandemic of
yeah, you're right.
Probably started with us spreading typhoid in Kansas. World War I started not in Spain. It was not the Spanish flu. It was started in Fort Riley, Kansas. But before that happened, it kind of reminds me of, excuse me, it reminds me of Putin complaining, because every time we would stand up one of these labs in Ukraine, the biolabs, he would complain back. I remember this in 2017, was complaining that every time we seem to stand these up, these weird diseases break out, like hantavirus or Crimean hemorrhagic fever. These are things that never were there before, in the history of Russia, but they would be breaking out as soon as they set up a lab. Well, in 1917 or late 1916, we set up a medical school in Kansas. And shortly thereafter, typhoid fever broke out. Now, typhoid is not endemic to the North American continent. We always hear the story of Typhoid Mary, but that's because typhoid is a bioweapon that they've used for a long time, and one person can spread it. Typhoid's a bacterium. We understand it. We know how this works, and it's still considered one of the top 10 bioweapons. So typhoid, you can spread it and you can create a disease. Well, I can't prove that happened, but it's very coincidental that the medical school goes in, they have an outbreak of typhoid, and then they decide to vaccinate all these military people for typhoid with these crude vaccines that came from the Rockefeller Institute and were partially put together on the site. That shows you how crude they were.
Wow.
And then a few months later, everybody gets meningitis. Now, if you look at the real story of naturally occurring meningitis, if you're lucky to have an outbreak that has more than 2 or 3 people, it usually is a very small number of people that get this. Maybe one. They worry about it after one, they make a big deal about it. But it's not these big outbreaks. The biggest outbreak I could find was in the gay community in the cities in the early 90s or late 80s. And there was a bunch of people that developed meningitis then, but it's generally not a big deal. But here we had 30 to 40% of the Navy and Army that had taken those vaccines got meningitis. But no worries. The Rockefeller Foundation sent Lieutenant Gates. Who knows his relationship to Billy, but he trained at Johns Hopkins. It's always the same institutions. It's the same names. He goes down from the Rockefeller Institute and brings now the new meningitis vaccine. And after that it broke out. Then the pandemic broke out a few months later. Now, at the time, in Kansas, they tried to vaccinate school children, and the parents resisted it.
Right.
So they did not vaccinate the school children. But when the pandemic broke out, it first broke out at an Indian school, and I think it was Haskell Indian School, but it was an Indian school, and probably they got the vaccine. I'm going to guess, because they were primary targets of the COVID vaccine. They probably did not have. It was a boarding school. Their parents were not there. I'm sure they vaccinated those guys, because that's the only schools where this thing broke out.
Okay.
So the pandemic. So the pandemic was a pandemic of, and then the other problem, just like in COVID, the pandemic of 1918 was 3 things. It was an electromagnetic thing. The 5G played a role in Wuhan and other places, I'm sure. That's a whole other story. But in 1918, we had these young guys from all over the country going down to Fort Riley, Kansas, and they were living, before they went there, they were living in an unelectrified world. They weren't in an electromagnetic field at all, really. But they go down to Fort Riley, Kansas, and what were they trained to do? They were trained to be telegram operators. And there was a disease in the 1800s called telegrapher's disease. If you're suddenly placed underneath a big electromagnetic field, you start getting a cough and jitteriness. And they figured out how to get over it because they put a twist in the telegram line. So we know that's a real deal.
Right.
Well, but it makes your lungs kind of friable. They're inflamed. So now you have guys with inflamed lungs. Now they get these vaccines that damage their immune system. They're coughing like crazy. So the third hit, just like we had remdesivir and this one, they had Bayer aspirin, and Bayer aspirin, it turns out, is they didn't know, theoretically, they didn't know it would cause bleeding, but they were giving it handfuls to bring the temperature down of these young recruits, right?
Right.
So these are getting handfuls of a drug that could cause you to bleed easy. These guys are coughing like crazy, and they bled out into their lungs. That's what the actual pathology showed. It showed It showed some died. It just looked like bacterial pneumonia. The pathologist couldn't figure out why it was acting so weird. They'd never seen bacterial pneumonia act like that. And then they said, and there's a bunch of them that just bled out into the lungs, which we can't explain. Well, that's why it happened.
Interesting. I did a show. This was kind of interesting. Back in 1859, there was a Chicago Medical Journal, and it's how the Indians, it's how the Native Americans, however you want to say it, got rid of smallpox, and the plant was called Sarracenia purpurea.
Yep.
It's the northern purple pitcher plant. Okay. And a
Yep.
lot of the Amish do extracts from this plant. So you can actually buy it in
I actually
Etsy
have
shops.
some on my desk.
Yeah, me too. And I'm so glad that everybody has that, because when I talked about that back in 2021, when I did a deep dive on it, what happens is when you put 10 drops, I guess, about 10 drops ish in a half glass of water, what it does is it stops replication in the body in 12 hours, and it can stop measles, typhoid, smallpox, who knows what else. And so,
but it's not stopping replication. It's what it's doing is giving you something. It's probably got potassium or something in it. It's doing something to your immune system to get rid of the toxins.
To get rid of it. So enabling the immune system to get rid of it.
Yeah.
And so what's interesting is they had this in the 1859 Chicago Medical Journal. So I was telling people, you know what? One of the smartest things you could do right now is to go get a little vial of this, have it on tap, have it in your food storage or in your storage, wherever you want to put it, because the FDA had released in 2021, they had approved a medicine for smallpox. And we're always hearing about measles in the press right now, right? Always in the winter. We're always hearing about measles cases, and they overblow it and exaggerate it and make it sound like everyone's dying of it, which is completely asinine, false, and ridiculous. But just so everyone knows, there are things like this that they talked about eons ago that they've sort of erased out of history in the last 125 years about it being something that can really help you. So it's called Sarracenia purpurea. It's the northern purple pitcher plant, and you can actually get extracts. You can actually get this from if you want to. What's the difference between an extract and a tincture? Do you know?
Well, extract doesn't tell you what it's in. I mean, most things, tincture uses alcohol.
Right.
So there are some oil-based extracts. There's some other things, water-based extracts, but tinctures are made with alcohol.
Okay.
It elutes the chemical, and most herbalists use that because that works on most things.
Okay.
But I the other thing I'll say is that we knew a lot of this when I was in medical school. I'm just going to tell you, this has been since the 70s that they've jigged this story, because when I was in medical school, I remember a pediatric lecturer, the first year of medical school, this guy said, he was showing us the real data on measles death, for example, and the real data on childhood diseases, not the truncated graph we're seeing today. And he says, vaccines didn't stop these childhood diseases, because they were just really coming to the fore then, and everybody was getting on the bandwagon. But you could tell he thought it was a flash in the pan. It was going to go away because it wasn't really what was the deal. He said, vaccines didn't stop childhood diseases death. Plumbers did. And I just remember that because it was such a funny line. But his point was right. If you clean up your environment and you're well nourished, you don't die of these diseases either. My generation, we all had measles, and I didn't know anybody that got really sick, other than we thought it was kind of a nice time to get away from school. But this has been a scam from the get-go, and the way they made the way they still make the deaths look bad is they combine it worldwide with the Africans. Well, they showed in Africa, if you just give the African kids vitamin A and vitamin D, they don't die of measles either. So you don't even have to be too exotic about this.
Right.
People that eat a normal diet of non-toxic things and mineralize themselves and take maybe some extra vitamin D, which is always a good thing, and something our standard medicine repudiates, but it's that you're not going to die of these things either.
Yeah.
And the other thing is sunshine. And what have they been doing? They've been telling us don't get too much sun. It damages your skin. Wear sunglasses, put on sunscreen. And it turned, the real story of disease is lack of energy in the body. When everything is physics, it's not really biology or chemistry. all disease is loss of electrons. When you get toxins in the body, the way you get rid of them is you surround them with negative charges, and then like a magnet pushing a south pole and a south pole, you push them out of your cells, and then they go into the lymph and into the bloodstream and into the liver, and they get processed, and you poop them out. That's how you get rid of toxins. The reason in smallpox that you got the blebs, and this is why in kids it doesn't. Kids do when they get a rash of measles, it's because kids. It's so their skin is so pliable, it's easy to get rid of toxins out of your skin, so they just do the simplest thing. But in smallpox, the reason it came out of your skin is you were so overwhelmed with toxins, you just couldn't survive if you didn't push it out every way you could.
Right.
And when you're in starvation, your liver doesn't function as well. So that's probably what that is, the whole story is. But the point is that it's you need energy in your cells to run the system to get rid of toxins. So we're in a system now where we're not getting enough sunlight. We're all sitting around computers. People are not going outside. They're told to wear sunglasses, and sun through your eyes is a big one, is a good one. And then I mean, look at the nursing home patients. That's the perfect storm to get the flu death in the winter, because flu again is just an accumulation of toxins when you can't get rid of them. They don't go outside. They are sprayed with all sorts of biocidal agents, and biocidal agents are toxic to you too. And they eat terrible food. And then when they're still alive in the fall, they give them a flu shot, and then they die. That's kind of the process in nursing homes. Yeah.
Isn't it
and that's
amazing?
But that's why we see a flu thing in the winter. It has nothing to do with breathing on each other. And I'll tell you, the bottom line here, I think, is the reason they want to promote the idea that you breathe on me, I breathe on you, we give each other germs, we make each other sick, we can have these huge pandemics, is because if we knew we were getting, if you think you're getting sick from another person, you're going to look around you if you're who gave it to you. If you think you're being poisoned, you're going to look for the poisoners. Well, we are being poisoned, and and they've told us they're poisoning us. If you look at what they write, we have to realize we are being poisoned. We're not. This whole idea of disease is wrong. We're being poisoned, and we are continuing to be poisoned. We're doing exactly the wrong things for being poisoned. And then people are dying.
So I have one last question, because I told you I wouldn't keep you very long today. But what do you think the idea behind chemtrails is? What is it actually doing? What are they benefiting from chemtrails? What are your thoughts? A lot of people think dimming the sun. A lot of people think they're laying out the groundwork for Project Bluebeam. Some of them think that it's just the chemicals. They just want us poisoned. What's your take? I've never asked you that.
Could be all of those things, to be honest. I mean, it could be all those things. I mean, the question is there any good reason to be doing it?
No.
And I can't come up with one. So if we assume it's the bad guys doing this, and there's nobody good doing it for reasons that we don't know. I mean, they've said I don't know if you ever saw it, but there's a thing called the Toronto Protocols, and it was a big Masonic meeting in Canada.
I've done deep dives on that on the show. Yes.
Well, okay. If you read that, they talk exactly about this, how they're going to put poisons in food, inject them into our children, put them in, and spray them from the skies. So I just think it's poisoning the environment and poisoning us.
True.
But again, I don't want to leave people with a doom and gloom, hopeless situation, because I don't think it is. I think actually we're coming out of this. I think I have to see the light at the end of the tunnel as more people wake up and realize what's going on. If they could have killed us with chemtrails, they wouldn't have been spending bazillions of dollars on false vaccines and all this other stuff they're doing. To really take us down, they have to get under our skin. So the number one thing to do is to stop being vaccinated. Do not take any none of these vaccines have ever been shown to decrease the amount of disease which they're purporting to do. We have more, look at flu by their own numbers has gone up, not down, since they've been given the vaccine. At some point you'd think they'd stop it, right? Yeah. But they don't. So don't take vaccines. The second thing is, and this is why I'm big on mineralization. I used to think these drinks, you can't do it with pills. You can't take a vitamin here and a vitamin there. There's some things you need to take, like vitamin D, but mostly you need minerals, because our soils are also been depleted from minerals because of the way that they got us farming, monoculture, poisons in the soil, all that kind of stuff. But if you have the right minerals, your body won't choose the bad minerals, even if you're being sprayed with them. So for the most part, you can get out of that.
Yeah.
And I think the third, at least to some degree, that's not what I'm thinking is going to kill us. The real problem is we have a huge uptick of dementia in this country.
Oh yeah.
And there's no question, when I went back, another one of my chapters is on chemical poisoning of the brain. And when you look at it, there's a 150-year history of bioweaponization of fluoride and aluminum. They go together, and what they do is they rearrange the metals in your brain. And there's no question that aluminum by itself causes dementia. We know that from renal dialysis. That happened when I was in training, that they found out it was the aluminum buildup in the way they were doing dialysis. It was giving people what they called dialysis dementia. But now we have it. People are getting it that aren't on dialysis, and people are getting dementia at rates we never saw.
You're right.
Dementia wasn't a thing of my great grandparents or grandparents.
It was rare.
Family history.
It was rare.
Rare. I mean, it's very rare, and it didn't happen until you were 90. Also, I mean, it was not something you got at 50.
Right.
So, and I think it's interesting that if there have been studies about aluminum content in water, and when the aluminum content gets up. Like if they did a Japanese study, and if I get the numbers are approximate here because I can't remember completely, but it was something at 10 micrograms per liter of aluminum in the water. And there's a big industry of using aluminum in Japan, but they only have 10 micrograms used. And they did a 6-city study, and they didn't, and very low dementia. But when you went to then England did the same study, and they had 110 micrograms. They did a 6-city study, and theirs was 110 micrograms, and their dementia rate was double. It was 50. No, it was 50. It was more than that. It was huge. But anyway, it was way more than Japan. It was like a double what Japan was. So then they did a 6-city study in America, and we're higher than England. We're 112 micrograms per. And you want to hear the funniest part? You know what city has the highest rate of dementia?
What city?
Or what area? Washington, D.C. And number 2 is Maryland.
Really?
That might, they have, in fact, I think it's 50% incidence of Alzheimer's in DC. It's something ridiculous.
Wow.
Now keep in mind, incidence means the number of people over the time. It's like, so it's a huge number, and it's like everything else is in the 20%, but it's a huge amount of people.
Yeah.
And it might explain our legal problems or legislative problems in DC if we have all these demented people. That's,
oh my
I don't
gosh.
know. But there's no question. And mad cow disease, all the brilliant chemists and scientists and blah, 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 they didn't figure it out. It was a rancher that figured it out. And it has to do with deficiency of copper and increased manganese in animals. Well, what have they been doing? Again, if you want to know the right way to go, just look at what the government says to do and do the opposite. Because what have they been doing? My entire career in medicine, they told us, don't get too much copper. You could have too much copper.
You're right.
In old hospitals, they used to prevent transmission of problems. They used to keep people healthier. They thought by giving them, everybody got copper mugs to drink out of, copper glasses, and they put linen sheets on. Linen and copper. That's what they used for health reasons in hospitals in the 1800s. And now we've got papers coming out saying, hey, if we use copper, it actually in sheets and stuff. And so we're relearning because we don't go back and look at the history. And
they took it out of the food supply. I know. That's why I tell people to go to FIQ supplements and go get the Recuperate Copper IQ. It's incredible. And I took it this morning because it is the orchestra leader of all the other minerals. No wonder they took it out of the food supply. That's why when people say, there couldn't have been a conspiracy, everything's a coincidence. I'm like, no, you would have to know that in order to want to take it out of the food supply starting in the 30s. You would want to handicap us and our immune system completely by taking out the orchestra leader of all the minerals, right? I mean, it's by design.
And to support that, I'll tell you a funny story. This is an Iowa story. So during the end of COVID timeframe, the Iowa legislature, as if they had nothing better to do, decided they were going to make it illegal to drink out of copper mugs in bars, Moscow mules. Now, I heard that, and I looked up how much copper you get from that, even if you believe it's bad. It's such a minute amount. And I said, what? This is before I understood the role of copper. So what's going on here? Well, you can't make this up. I mean, this is just stupid, but it's not stupid. They've been told to do that by somebody that knows what's going on. Okay.
Exactly.
And so they come up with a cockamamie excuse for it, but really they just don't want us to have any copper. Copper also restores your soil. If you farm with copper and not iron, you'll grow more in your garden. That's electroculture. I do that all the time. And the soils are depleting copper. Whatever they've been putting on the soils, that's probably one of the reasons of spraying is probably worse than what it does to us, is what it's doing to the soils.
John Wayne wore a copper bracelet. Thanks, LB. John Wayne wore a copper bracelet during his life, which he believed had healing properties to cancer. Yeah. Well,
it does a lot of things. Whatever, we don't exactly know everything it does, but there were so many reports, like in France and I think it was in Italy or someplace. There were several reports that during, like in the cholera, there were 4 cholera outbreaks. Now, cholera is a real disease. It's a bacterium. We know what causes that, and it comes in the water supply. But people that were copper workers didn't get it. Okay. So it helps you avoid disease, and copper is an electrical transmitter. Why manganese is a problem is it's like a battery. It stores the charge. So we need to have not only do we need sunlight and we need energy in our cells, but we ought to charge our batteries. Every cell in your body is a battery. We need infrared and near infrared light to charge your cells. But you need enough copper and salt. Another lie is salt. Salt is, you don't get hypertension, high blood pressure because of too much salt. You get into trouble when you have too little salt.
Yes.
And then you have to. Yes, it's a big problem. So when you get rid of your electrolytes, you cannot run your systems. And so all of this adds together.
Yeah. If your doctor says cut back on salt, like you should probably maybe seek another doctor. I think some of these these doctors are really hindering people. Well,
and David Brownstein's the guy. I listened to his lecture when I was down at the Weston A. Price conference a couple years ago, and I'm sitting in the back of the room, and he's going through how he has a chart, and on the left side of the chart is this great big tall bar, and then there are a bunch of short bars along to the right. And he asked the audience, he said, which side, this is cardiovascular serious event or death, which side do you think is the low salt side? And it was the big bar, because when your salt goes down, what happens is you can't keep your blood pressure up. So what do? Well, you take all the water, you try and bring the stuff in from your cells and your salt from your cells, but you can only do that so much. All you do is end up with cankles, the swollen, fuzzy ankles. And then you turn on, when that fails, you turn on a system called the angiotensin system. Angio meaning vessel, tension means tense, tense and tension. So you're squeezing your vessels, and it's a very imprecise system. So it overshoots, you get hypertension, and then your doctor gives you a pill. So I'm sitting in the back of the room and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I just had some friends that wanted to go on to a health thing, and they said, oh, we should be drinking 8.5 cups of water a day. And I'm sitting in the back of the room because I told them, I said, that's nonsense. Why would we need to do that if you're not need it? But I'm sitting in the back of the room saying it's all over the internet to drink 8.5 cups or 8 cups of water a day. What's that going to do if you're low salt? It's going to make it worse. It's going to dilute out the salt worse. You see what they do? So this is not by accident. None of this is.
Dr. Lee Merritt, I've kept you longer than I said I would. I apologize. And I know you have stuff going on. So I will have you back on soon. And I really appreciate all the info. You've done some pretty good deep dives. Nice. I love it. Thank you so much. For having me on. You're awesome. That was just super fun. It always is with her. Dr. Lee Merritt. So you can go to themedicalrebel.com, themedicalrebel.com, and you can get more info on Dr. Lee Merritt and what she talks about. And I really, really appreciate her doing that. She's a good friend, and we love doing deep dives in our material and so forth, because it's fascinating. She brought something up, and I wasn't going to comment on this today, but I might as well, with everything going on, because I am going to talk about Iran. I am going to talk. I have a lot. You should see my list of things to talk about. So, and I know I missed yesterday. I took advantage of the holiday, had a super busy 4 days, and took advantage of that. So sorry to anyone that tuned in, and I really apologize. So, the Toronto Protocols, that was the book that Sergei Manost was killed for. He was in his 40s and he was murdered. It was a book that he found called the Toronto Protocols. It was a Canadian meeting back in 1967. And it was called the 666, ironically. It was the biggest bankers, the 6 of the biggest bankers, 6 of the most powerful energy companies, and 6 of the most powerful global food producers. And they laid out a plan and they called it their reunion. Okay. This is the Toronto Protocols. You can actually order this, which is kind of crazy. It's hard to find, but you can find it. So this is, it gets kind of fascinating as you go through what they were wanting to do, but they wanted to change the idea of the family. They wanted to make sure and give the state and the feds the parental authority over the parents. So that was one of the protocols. That was one of the Toronto protocols that they were setting forth, was the liberation of the individual. This is why you see the age go down to 12 instead of 18. This is why you see states like California, and you see stuff going on in Canada right now, all kinds of things right now across the board where they're trying to make the minor very, very young, but also try to take away the rights of the parents and give those rights to the education system. Okay. So they wanted to thereby, and I'll give you a kind of a comment from this Toronto protocol. It said, thereby transferring the parental role to the state, it will become much easier for us to monopolize one by one all the responsibilities that had been to this day the exclusive responsibility of parents. Yeah. The legal protections, taking those away from parents, in which our government's supposed to fight for those, but they're not exactly doing that. So, and they also talked about the staff needed to get their plans launched and I quote from the Toronto Protocols, for guaranteed success of such an enterprise, it's essential that civil servants who work in these offices in the service of the state are young, without past experiences, that are imbued but with ideas which we consider empty and vain, but believe with missionary enthusiasm that they are protectors of vulnerable children. See, get them to believe they're the protectors, but get them to do heinous things, basically. Let me go back. These officials, and I quote from the Toronto Protocols, 1967, these officials must consider all parents to be potential criminals who can be a danger to the welfare of the child. And so they wanted the workers in these departments of child welfare to get younger and younger, so they weren't bound to wisdom, experience, and can be fully on the side of the state. Okay? You know how you see young doctors, young pilots, so many young nurses, the old guard of the nurses being ousted during COVID, right? Blovid, the lie of Blovid. Because you'll see all kinds of fresh new faces, because they can certainly tell these fresh new faces what to do. I noticed this in the hospital with my husband. I noticed that the young ones were going along hook, line, and sinker and basically looking at me like I was the villain. Some of the older nurses were like really contemplating what I was saying when I did not go with all the advice the hospital was giving me. And when I say advice, I'm using the term lightly. When they wanted me to do exactly what the government had told them to do to my husband, when I wasn't going along with that, you could see some of the old guard of the nurses really taking in the information and contemplating, like, well, now what is she doing? And why is it working? And why is her husband out of here in a few days? And why isn't he dead? Like that. The young nurses looked at me like I was the villain. They were rude. They were horrifying. They were idiots. I'm sorry, but they were. I hate to say that because it sounds mean, but they truly were. And I was just like blown away by the amount of hostility toward me by the younger ones. Okay. So then it goes on to talk about the Toronto Protocols, 1967, the 666. The success of our world plan, the Red Plan, it is necessary to implant all Western societies of the 70s, offices for the protection of kids, and the Charter of the Rights of the Child. It goes into a lot of that. You can actually go look at this yourself if you want to. Also talked about the flow of refugees, which we talk about all the time, right? And these are illegals. They'll call them refugees, but they're illegals, okay? The plan, once they were able to restrict nation states' margins by using international economy, global trade, and expensive UN projects launched to handle all crisis, people's minds can be controlled freely as well. I'm quoting from the book. This independent economy will operate on the basis of our laws, and hereby we will establish a global mass culture. With the help of the international media we control, 1967, folks, we will establish a new culture which will be uniform, thus making it practically impossible that someone would create something new. The future artists will be like we want them to be, or else they will not be artists. How many times have I been talking about Hollywood last year? We don't have to fear anymore that such independent works of art come into being that endangered the realization of our global ambitions so often in the past. The most interesting paragraph of the document was written 20 years ago, but it was about the use of migrant crisis in order to realize the global plans. And I quote, "To assure us at all costs of the success of such an enterprise, making sure that our agents already infiltrated the ministries of intergovernmental affairs and immigration of nation states, make in-depth modifications to these laws of the ministries. These modifications will essentially aim to open the doors of the Western countries to a more and massive immigration inside their borders." What's been happening? And neither party has stopped it? Okay. Immigrations that we will provoke by taking care of touching off here and there new local conflicts by well-orchestrated press campaigns in the public opinion of nation states targeted. We shall provoke among them a significant refugee influx, which will destabilize their eternal economy and increase the racial tensions inside their territory. We have to take care that there are foreign extremists that they are among the migrants as well. This will facilitate the destabilization. Okay. So they talked about violence and food. They talked about emergency budgetary measures. We shall so break the financing of nation states for all their mega projects, which represent a direct threat to our world control of the economy. They set out to do a lot. They set out to break the national wills of modern structures of the domains of energy, agricultural, transport, and new technologies. To accelerate this process of transfer, we shall imply the correct force of the United Nations in conflicts impossible to sort out. In this way, and by means of the media, which we control. Notice how they say that quite a bit? We shall show to the populations the impotence and the uselessness of this force in its current shape. That helping frustrations and push to a climax at the appropriate moment will push the populations of nation states to beg the international authorities to form a multinational force as soon as possible to protect at all costs the quote unquote peace. So they're constantly talking about this, constantly drumming up the racial tensions. So why? So they can go above and beyond the police, above and beyond the federal police to the multinational force. Okay. So it goes on, and they wanted the police bodies of nation states to have quick access to data banks on all potentially dangerous individuals for us on the planet. They wanted it to be maintained by the military to help emphasize the necessity of an international court, doubled by a world judicial system. The plan all along was to put us into regions so that the multinational forces could come in and protect us, and then also be over us as far as the laws, which oust the Constitution. That's what it's all about. This was 1967. Sergei Manost, upon finding this and making sure that the world kind of heard about this, was murdered. Young father murdered. So kind of interesting. You might want to take a little dip in this pool, because I'm telling you, it's really crazy. In fact, this is what they go on to say. During the growth accepted by all these new necessities, it will be imperative for us to complete as soon as possible world control of firearms inside the territories of nation states. To do it, we shall accelerate the Alpha Plan. It's called the Alpha Plan. Isn't it interesting that you see Alpha in some of the companies that are really the government? Like Google? Interesting. All right. So the Alpha Plan, implemented during the 60s by some of our predecessors. This plan, quote unquote, originally aimed at two objectives, which remain the same even today. By the intervention of crazy shooters, Remember how we talked about the lone gunman coming out ever since the CIA was created? You didn't really see lone gunmen before that. The crazy shooters create a climate of insecurity in the populations to bring a tighter control of firearms. Direct acts of violence as so to make it appear the responsibility of religious extremists or persons affiliated to religious allegiances of traditional tendency, or persons claiming to have privileged communications with God. You know how they always try to make everyone look mental, right? Conservative and mental. Okay, and so they said to accelerate the control of firearms will use the fall of the economic conditions of the nation states, a complete social destabilization, and increase the violence. I do not need to remind you nor demonstrate to you, brothers, the foundation of the control of firearms. Without this one, it would become almost impossible for us to put on their knees the populations of targeted states. Remember yourselves with which success our predecessors were able to control Germany of 1930 with the new laws, quote unquote, applied in the time. Laws, moreover, which are based on the current laws of the nation state. The last stage relate to the omega phase, experimented from all experiments made at the beginning of the 70s. They will contain the application, the world level electromagnetic weapons, the changes of climate entailing the destruction of the harvests, the bankruptcy in these conditions, farmlands, it goes on and on and on, and use of massive use of chemicals in agriculture. So, yeah, there's that. So, with that said, let's talk about some of the things going on right now, because I think this is really, really, really important. Okay. And when I do these deep dives, this information is so nutty. I mean, it's so crazy how it can sort of nail what's on the horizon. Yes. Very strange. So, number one, surrounded by billionaires in Davos. This is an AP article today, or I think it was yesterday. Surrounded by billionaires in Davos, Trump plans to lay out how he'll make housing more affordable. It's not the government's role to make housing more affordable. Okay. Who's he sitting next to? The fake Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook. He's the fake face of Facebook. He didn't invent Facebook, but they're making him again look like a billionaire that needs to have a seat at the table. So in the eyes of the world, Mark Zuckerberg creates a social network and he's sitting at the table of Davos, the World Economic Forum. Interesting. So he is just the face, okay? Now, there is something that I kind of want to go over for a moment because I thought this was interesting. There was an article, and this was put out by William Jasper, and it's on the New American. Okay, so I'm going to talk about Iran for just a moment because I thought this was interesting. Okay, I'm making a note so I can do a short. Okay, so this was the article. Okay, let's open this up a little bit, shall we? The Iran regime change. Will we replace the Ayatollahs with neocon communists? Now, that's the question of the article by William Jasper. The New American usually does a pretty good job. The problem I'm seeing is the question shouldn't be, will we replace the Ayatollahs with neocon communists? But the question should always be, have we been doing this for a very long time? Okay. And let me tell you why. Let me tell you why I say that. Okay. Now, when I'm talking about Iran, there's something that I really want you to know. Again, people are accusing me of being a Jew hater, and they put like myself and Eric Moutsos into like a group. Like, I don't know why it keeps happening, but it's like you and Eric think he's like an influencer in Utah. He doesn't have a show or anything, but and he's been around since COVID. So, okay. So you and Eric are Jew haters. And I'm getting this from all these different avenues. And I'm like, why are people saying this? I have been so vocal about how I feel about Israel and separating government from people and talking about the fact that the government is, you have people in the government using the Jewish people, using the Jewish religion, the Jewish culture. They aren't, but they're using it to harm and abuse and do things that we should not be okay with. But Christians in America are taught that you're supposed to give a blank check and all your trust to Israel, and whatever Israel does is noble. And they also, the same people that believe that, also believe that the USA and the CIA are noble, that we're always doing what's noble. So if we're making a move, it's the right move. I don't know what to say to that except complete bewilderment at people being so crazy that they would actually believe that after we have so many things in our face. But I've never been a Jew hater. I'm not a Catholic hater. I'm not anybody hater. I'm actually a protector because I don't want to see people get used. I don't want to see people get used by our CIA. I don't want to see people get used over in Israel. But the UN created Israel, okay? The powers that be, the deep state, created the state of Israel to be where it is. People have a hard time with kind of figuring out what maybe the land of Zion is with Zionists, okay? They don't know the difference. And that kind of ignorance, you're just going to, I know it's bewildering, I know it's astonishing, but the Zionists are the people that pretend to be Jews, okay? So we must always out them. But in doing so, I get called a Jew hater. I'm like, I'm a Jew hater? Are you really? I've never said that in my life. I've never said a derogatory word about an entire group of people like that because it's never about the people. Just like I would never say a blank statement about Americans. I would never say a blank statement about the French. Because whenever I'm talking about the politics of government and how they use religion to do things and how they use being a patriot to do something and how they use being Jewish to carry out plans. I'm always talking about the deep state. So you should want me to do that. This should be something that's very desirable to you. If you are a true Christian, you would want me to out the liars. Christ said, they say they are mine, but their hearts are far from me. Hello. So there you go. I am outing those that say they are his, but their hearts are far from him. So it's very irresponsible to say that whatever move the CIA makes, and it's just astonishingly just naive to think that whatever Israel does is okay. But there are people that do that. Okay. If you want to get into religious terms, the gathering of Israel is about all the tribes. It's the gathering of all the tribes, not just the Jewish people. Okay. And that's people all over the world, not a geography, not a state line that the deep state put in. Okay. So that area is utilized and used to be a beacon for the deep state. So you must separate the people from its government, and the government is always lying. So the left are going to condemn all of Israel and all the Jews. The right is going to give a blank check of trust. Somewhere in between would be the truth. Okay. So we must separate. So I had to say that again because I'm getting accused of it again. And I don't understand why, but holy hell, would you guys stop saying stuff like that? It's not true. And it's really disingenuous. And I'm getting really tired of it. Okay. Because I've been so vocal and I've said this over and over and over again on the air. So I don't know why people are this ignorant. Okay. So there was this piece and it said, will we replace the Ayatollahs? Now, this is really interesting. You guys are going to want to perk up for this one. Okay. So have you ever heard of Maryam Rajavi? Maryam is the National Council of Resistance of Iran, okay, or MEK, M-E-K, okay? Mojahedin, Kalk or whatever it's called. So M-E-K, we'll call it M-E-K because that's what they call it, M-E-K. You're going to be hearing a lot about this, and William Jasper is right about this. That they are the new saviors of democracy, whom we must install as the new leadership of Tehran. So we're told by the neocon globalist chorus. And he's right about this. Okay. They've been singing this tune for many years, but now it might happen. Now, here's what I want to present to you for just a moment. Okay. Before I get into Erica Kirk, before I get into all the other stuff. You know, I'm always going to give you like what you need to know right now. Okay. So there was the January 13 Daily Express CBS story about the horror in Iran. Okay. Remember, they own the media. Okay. Horror in Iran as 12,000 protesters slaughtered in brutal regime crackdown. Okay. And of course, when you see an article like this sent to us again and again from the AP, which is a bunch of liars, and the Reuters, which is also a bunch of liars, because our news sources only come from two sources, AP and Reuters, which both are scumbaggery liars, okay, and have been for eons and eons and eons. When they say we own the press, this is who they own. They spin out the stories, and then everyone else takes the viewpoint of the AP and Reuters and then sends it out as their own news story, okay? So 12,000 is a really round number. You would notice 12,000 people, okay, protesters murdered. So I think they're lying. Okay, I think they're lying. And we don't have any real pictures or concrete evidence of this, okay? So sources within MEK, M-E-K, which is fighting to bring full democracy to Iran after 47 years of an Islamic dictatorship, said the new figures were based on investigations drawing on local sources, hospitals, forensic medicine centers, and the family of those killed or disappeared across the 195 cities. Okay, that was in the Daily Express, also in CBS. The MEK is delisted as a terrorist organization by Clinton, Hillary, and Barack Obama's reign. Democrats who have been jumping on the MEK wagon for them to go into power are Bill Clinton, Howard Dean, Hakeem Jeffries, Louis Freeh, Bill Richardson, Cory Booker, all those ridiculous people, sickening people, Sheila Jackson Lee. And not to be outdone, you also have Marco Rubio, Lindsey Graham, John Bolton, Mike Pompeo, Richard Pearl, Tom Cotton, Ted Cruz, Mike Pence, and so many more. They're all on the bandwagon for MEK. So why should you wonder about MEK in Iran? Well, both sides of the aisle of the alliances which buy our congressmen and senators are all on board the MEK, and they're going to make it look like it's a revolutionary group. What do we know about revolutionary groups? Well, what do we know? Let me think about that, Kate. What do we know about revolutionary groups? Well, let me tell you. And by the way, this is the chick. Okay, this is the chick everyone's talking about, okay, just so everybody understands, okay? This is Miriam, okay? Miriam, however you want to say it. Who even cares at this point? But what's happening is they're calling some of these people the George Washington of Iraq, just all kinds of weird, crazy things. So are we about to see a repeat with Miriam Rajavi, the MEK regime change in Iran, reprising the ICN regime change in Iraq? Good question, because this chick is kind of interesting. Let me tell you why. They're in the article in the New American. You should go check this out because they did a good job on this. No question, the Iranian regime from Khomeini in 79 to Khomeini today is a brutal totalitarian dictatorship. Now, I am going to go a step further and say I think they're very controlled. Now, they're not putting that in the article, The New American, but I think they're 100% controlled, and I'm going to show you why. I'm going to show you a glimpse of why I say that. Jimmy Carter and his CFR trilateral, this is from the article, trilateral commission handlers, Brzezinski, Cyrus Vance, Warren Christopher, all those guys, along with the New York Times, the Post, PBS, and the rest of the deep state media herd, were demonizing the Shah Reza Pahlavi, right, and glorifying Khomeini. We were exposing their lies to the truth in the pages of American Opinion and the review of the news, as well as the bulletin of the John Birch Society. Okay, so the Iran and the Shah and what really happened and so forth. Okay, so this is what the article says. Regardless of the anti-globalist MAGA rhetoric, U.S. President Donald Trump has surrounded himself, or at least has allowed himself to be surrounded with neocon interventionists who are pushing him to engage in military ventures. Okay. Remember the CBS story, January 13, over 12,000 feared dead after Iran protests as video shows bodies lined up at morgue. When was the last time you saw the line lined up at the morgue, bodies everywhere? Whenever they're spewing a lie, spewing a lie, spewing a lie, like they did with Blovid. Remember when they were saying that in New York, bodies were everywhere? They were everywhere on the ground. You had to step over bodies at the park. Okay. And they were lying. They were lying to everybody. They said all the hospitals were full. They were lying. Everything was about the bodies, the horror, the bodies. And I had somebody in New York who was a record producer, and she was telling me, she goes, hey, I'm loving your coverage on COVID. Thank you for telling the truth, because I'm in New York and bodies are not everywhere. And this is ridiculous. This is a lie. And in 2020, it's the same amount of bodies there always has been, because it's the homeless bodies that they keep taking pictures of. The homeless that die all the time, that don't have a place to go. These are the bodies they're taking photos of. So whenever I see a headline like that, over 12,000 feared dead after Iran protests as video shows bodies lined up at the morgue. Really? Where is that? Where's the picture of that? Where is it? I'd love to know, because you'll never see it. You won't see it. Okay. They'll never show it. They're just going to keep telling you in the news that this has happened. Okay. So, by the way, well, let me go to this chick, okay? Because this is kind of an interesting one. So let's go to her, because I think I was going to talk about the leader of Iran right now, but I do want to go to her. So Maryam Rajavi, or Miriam, or whatever her name is, she's an Iran dissident politician and leader of MEK, okay, with her husband, advocating the overthrow of the Iranian government, all right? And president-elect of the NCRI, the National Council of Resistance of Iran. Now, what do we know about groups? We know that the CIA and the Mossad and all the different CIA groups control these groups. They invent these groups. They place people in these groups. So just keep that in mind as I'm saying that. She served as the organizer of the anti-Shah student movement in the 1970s. This chick, Rajavi. In 1979, she became the official of the social section of the MEK in 79, where she served until 1981. She was the parliamentary candidate in 1980. She was then transferred to France. Because what do you do when you're a dissident? You go to France. Okay. So basically, I just wanted you guys to know that Miriam, she's had a lot of legal trouble, but the legal trouble has never actually amounted to anything. Don't you find that a little odd? She's transferred to France. Okay. And then in 2018, there was a Vienna-based Iranian diplomat called Asadi who was tried and sentenced to 20 years in prison for masterminding a terrorism plot against a rally led by Rajavi, this chick. Okay. Whose picture you're looking at. And this rally was also attended by civilians and high-profile Westerners scheduled to speak, like Rudy Giuliani and Bill Richardson. Interesting. But then you never heard another word about it. Then on 2003, Rajavi was arrested by Paris police alongside 150 MEK members. Do you think they would put them in prison and you'd kind of never hear about them, right? No. She and 23 other people in this group of 150, remember the ratios of bought and sold CIA Fed members to people? Remember, we've talked about this a lot, like January 6th and all these different events, the Bundys, okay? And there's always a huge amount of people, okay, that are bought and sold, that are amongst the group pretending to be one of the members. Well, her and 23 other people, this was 2003, were investigated over suspicion of links of terrorism, but all the charges were dropped. No. Yes. They were all dropped. I wonder why. If you're a terrorist, aren't you a terrorist? I mean, come on. Suspiciously just dropped for 23 members and Rajavi. In Iraq in 2010, the Iraqi High Tribunal issued an arrest warrant for 39 MEK members, including Rajavi, due to evidence that confirms they committed crimes against humanity by involvement with the former Iraqi security services in suppressing the 1991 uprising. Now, this is 2010. And they're going back to 1991, suppressing the 1991 uprising against the former Iraqi regime and the killing of Iraqi citizens. The MEK denied the charges, saying that they constitute a politically motivated decision. Nothing happened. Okay. Boy, that's a lot of like letting this person off. Also, and that's just a few of them. Also, they never state who her parents are. All they say is that she's linked to the Kahar dynasty. She comes from middle-class Iranian family of civil servants, but they don't know their names. Who's she from? Where's her family? Who is her family? Do you know you cannot get the information? Boy, that's interesting. She was born in 1953 in Tehran, Iran, and you never know anything about her. Now, this is strange, but her husband's in the same boat. His name, and let me show you his photo because this gets more interesting, okay? So this is her husband, Masood. Okay? So Masood, okay, he joined the MAK when he was 20 and a law student at the University of Tehran. Do you think the University of Tehran might have, I don't know, ties to the CIA? Let's find out. He graduated with a degree in political law. Rajavi and the MEK, this is Masood, the husband, actively opposed the Shah of Iran and participated in the 1979 Iranian Revolution. Interesting past. He came from a prominent family, although you're not allowed to know who his parents are. But they're prominent. Everyone should know them. Nope, you don't get to know them. You don't get to know anybody. He received a degree in political law from the Tehran University. His brother was Iran's ambassador to the United Nations in Geneva, who held doctoral degrees from the universities in Paris and Geneva. They had 3 older brothers, cardiologist in France, Ahmad, a British educated surgeon, and Husheng, an engineer. I know I'm murdering these names. I'm doing it on purpose. An engineer in Belgium. Okay. So during the Pahlavi regime, he was arrested by Savak, and sentenced to death. This is Masood. This is the husband that is the co-leader of the MEK. Due to efforts by his brother, who worked for the UN, who was the liaison to the UN, and Swiss lawyers and professors, his sentence was reduced to life imprisonment. So why didn't he serve life imprisonment? Oh, he was released from prison during the Iranian Revolution in 79. Wow. I wonder why. That was a lot of years ago. He never did serve his time. Not even close. He was let out. You know, it's funny. Julian Assange was in the same boat. He had a life imprisonment ahead of him. And then all of a sudden, a couple of years in, he was just released on his good behavior. Interesting. So many people, that's the case. Are they easy to control? Do they get some sort of, status from the CIA, from the feds, for being somebody that will take part in a revolution and look like the guy that's provoking the revolution? When you want to control all sides, you usually want to control people that have maybe life imprisonment ahead of them. Right. And something interesting about the University of Tehran, where all these groups are established, kind of like in America, where the groups are established. This is interesting. The first official step of the establishment, or the present form, of University of Tehran in Iran occurred in 1931. There was, from the Minister of Court, I can't even, I'm going to murder this guy's name. Tamordish? Anyway, he was completing his doctoral dissertation at Columbia University in New York. Where have I heard of Columbia University? Like Columbia Pictures, like Columbia everything. That's right. It's a CIA hangout. Interesting. So this comes from a doctoral dissertation at Columbia University in New York to inquire as to the requirements for the establishment of the University of Tehran. And this letter from Isa Sedek regarded the letter as an invitation to outline a comprehensive scheme for the establishment of this new university. There's always the ties that bind that pop up in the description of these things. Isn't that kind of fascinating to everybody? So what about the MEK? Now, I want you to listen to this because I think this is very interesting. When I talk about Iran being controlled, this is what I mean, okay? If you go back into Wiki, okay? Let's go back into Wikipedia, the history that we're all given, courtesy of AI now, okay? So between August and September of 1971, SAVAK, S-A-V-A-K, arrested and executed many MEK members, including its co-founders, okay? So even if it started out with people that actually wanted the CIA out of Iran, okay, the surviving member, a lot of them would have been killed, okay? So some surviving members, maybe they were already bought, these surviving members, just a question, restructured this group, okay, this MEK group in 1971 by replacing the central leadership with a 3-man central committee. And each of the 3 central committee members led a separate branch of the organization. 2 of the original central committee members were replaced in 72 and 73. And the last one was replaced in 1975. Do you see where I'm going with this? Do they say why? No. They never tell you why. So in 1973, a big shift happened when they replaced the leadership of the MEK. The MEK you're going to be hearing a ton about, that all the politicians on both sides are all for, okay? 1973, MEK members declared themselves, drumroll, okay, Marxist-Leninist. Went into Marxism. Isn't that interesting? 1973, launched an internal ideological struggle. And by 1975, 2 opposing MEK factions had formed, one being Muslim and the other Marxist. I wonder if it was commandeered by the CIA. I don't even think you have to guess at this point. Okay. So they had asserted, the Marxist offshoot had asserted, which is pretty much the whole organization, but they don't want to tell you that, had reached the conclusion that Marxism, not Islam, was the true revolutionary philosophy. Isn't that amazing? And isn't it amazing that our people on the right, like Lindsey Graham, deep in the closet, and all these different, even Ted Cruz, weird, is really behind the MEK? Yeah. So Rajavi, upon release from prison during the revolution, because he didn't do his time, but was released and wasn't murdered, because they just often murdered people, but he wasn't. He and his wife, right, had to rebuild the organization. Can you imagine the struggle? Especially when you work for the CIA, okay? Mossad and all of them. They're all one. Navy intelligence, they're all one, okay? So, yeah. It was the Shah Reza, right, that had actually established the University of Tehran, by the way. And I just want to say this because this was, this was back, he was Shah from 1925 to 1941 when we had control over Germany, when we had control over Russia and was sending all the Bolsheviks, okay, the Bolsheviks. Oh my gosh, what is the name? Anyway, that you know what I'm talking about. Sorry, brain fry. So all of that was done by the deep state. Well, this is kind of interesting, but the Shah, in an effort to reduce British and Russian influence, sought partnerships with the United States and Germany until 1931. There was a lot of relationships. It's kind of like when people say China's our enemy and China's always kind of had this autonomy and worked by itself against us. And yet, I've proven on the show over and over again that that isn't true, actually. We were sending a ton of money to China in the 1800s and in the early 1900s, and we still do, but lots of money. And the ties that bind, okay? And the Chinese were coming over here for jobs because of the poverty levels. There was a lot of control going on by the Rockefellers, okay? Stemming from the Rothschilds too. But I just kind of wanted to go over again that there was a backed coup in 1953. Okay. Operation Ajax. All right. And this is what overthrew the Iran's prime minister, Mossadegh, right? Not the Shah himself, as Mossadegh had forced the Shah to flee temporarily. Then the Shah remains Iran's ruler until the 1979 Iranian Revolution. Who do they pull out of prison? 1979. Who's at the helm? The same people we're talking about today in Iran. Same people. Yeah. Kind of crazy, right? Do we control Iran? I think 100%. I think they control the narrative. I think they control the press. I think they have to make it always look like there are people in Iran fighting, but it's heavily controlled, just like any color revolution. So when we talk about Iran, I just want you guys to keep in mind that it doesn't matter who you're talking about in the press. Though that person will have ties to the United States, Colombia. They'll have gotten out of jail time, a lot of suspicious things. And when I see Ted Cruz and Tom Cotton and Mike Pompeo and John Bolton and Lindsey Graham and Marco Rubio all cheering for the MEK, along with Bill Clinton and Howard Dean and Jeffries and Bill Richardson and Louis Freeh and Cory Booker and Judy Chu and Sheila Jackson Lee and Bob Menendez, you have to know we have a problem, a big, huge problem in Iran. Okay, of us not understanding that I think we actually highly, highly control this animal. We truly do. There just isn't it's not like Angel Blue says, all the usual suspects, and you are right. Comment from YouTube. You are right. Columbia Pictures. I mean, my gosh, you guys, we have had it like in our face for so long, so much of it. Where did Barack go? Do I even have to tell you? No one remembers him. No one remembers Barack, but he went to Colombia. Isn't that? Yeah. Didn't they say that? He went to Colombia. Okay. Love Colombia. It's very, very interesting. All right. So let's also talk about the Northern Lights. Okay. So, okay. I'm just making a note. Northern Lights. Now, let me add this to the stage here, okay? This is kind of fascinating too. Although the Northern Lights can be beautiful to look at because we're seeing these all the time now, and I don't know if you guys realize, but it's in the news constantly, and a lot of people are saying that it's very scammy and that it's also something that is utilized for what's becoming Bluebeam. Project Bluebeam, one of the scariest things I've ever read. I don't get spooked easily. The Northern Lights can be very beautiful to look at, but there's a high probability that they are man-made from HAARP pumping and from CERN, pumping intense frequencies into the ionosphere, especially when people are seeing them as far south as New Mexico and Florida, because it's not usual for us to see them. So why are we? The mainstream media wants you to think, wants you to believe that the sun is causing the auroras with electromagnetic storms. And this is because they're preparing people for a grid down event, and they will blame it on solar flares. Okay. Ooh, I love this. Thank you for the comment. We had a magical night last night in the Netherlands. I'm sure you did. I'm sure you did. Thanks for the comment on YouTube. So if and when the grid does go down, it will be our own government who are the culprits. And if all goes right along the agenda, the order out of chaos thing, I'm sure they'll try to tie it in with their climate change narrative. Okay. And continue restricting our rights to gain more control and blame it on the masses like always. Think of it as a warning to get your house in order. This comes from Cody Osborne. I think that might be very true. We're seeing it in really strange, weird, diverse places, and it's not a normal thing to have happen. So then you have to ask yourself, why now? Well, we have a lot of things that now there is the truth about the Northern Lights. So for those saying it's BS, no, there's the truth about the Northern Lights. You can go see the Northern Lights. But why are they showing up all over the United States right now? Why are they so easy to see for everybody? That is what's unusual. So what's causing that? And honestly, a lot of people out there are going, there's something very weird about what's going on in our skies. Now, if you know Project Bluebeam, okay, Project Bluebeam is about presenting us with holograms that come out of the skies, and they're made to look very real. And there's a concerted effort to scam us with UFO sightings and with things just coming out of the sky. So is this laying the groundwork for that, the believability of the groundwork of what's coming through our skies? Well, they're certainly messing with our skies a lot. So I have to entertain the idea. Have I come to any kind of conclusion on this? Not really, because honestly, it's hard. It's hard to. But I will say this, it is intriguing if you're looking at it from that angle, because then as you watch the headlines and they're getting more and more vocal about UFOs, and the government's like, hey, since 2017, we're admitting to UFOs. Remember, for 20 years, for the last 25 years, as soon as we all got cell phone cameras that are really great, the UFO sightings stopped. The people that were sitting in the back of the truck in the middle of farm field that were taken up by a UFO and probed to death through the anus, that's not happening anymore. So interesting that we all have a cell phone camera, but no UFO sightings are actually happening anymore. So you gotta kind of think about that one. We all have the availability now to take a photo on a whim because our cameras are with us. Where are they? They're nowhere. Okay. So we have a problem with, I think, us kind of realizing or thinking it out, the probability of the fact, what we're actually dealing with here. Okay. I think UFOs are faked. I do. I think they're faked by our government. Is there a possibility within the realm that we could have life on other planets? I'm not totally knocking that out. Okay. But I am saying that the government utilizes the narrative for their own purposes, and they didn't start really getting going on the little green men until in the 1950s, when the CIA came into existence in the late 40s, and they really had to push out an agenda. Then the government pretended that they didn't exist until 2017, when now they pretend that they do. So you kind of have to wonder why they flopped so easily into we were hiding it desperately, and now we're not. We're actually promoting it in the media. You kind of have to ask yourself why that's going on. Okay. I think it's a fair question anyway. All right. So here's another one. So shifting gears a little bit from that, just because I think that we actually really do need to kind of keep our eyes on this whole thing. Something's going on, something that's kind of strange and weird and everything else. Erica Kirk is in the news again, not grieving and not with her children. I don't mean to be mean, but something is really wrong in this story. I was talking to some people over the weekend, and they were just like, what is going on? Okay. So I just think this is kind of, I don't know, fascinating. So now she is trying to say that Charlie believed in the Constitution, but there's a big old but, okay? And that but means that we are in a situation where we shouldn't really regard the Constitution. We should just rush this thing along, okay? Tyler Robinson did not kill Charlie Kirk. Did not. I don't believe that narrative or story or BS by a landslide, okay? It did not happen from him. Isn't it interesting, this medic that was here at the scene? I always find that kind of fascinating because you never heard about the medic that was there. So that's kind of interesting. Also, I wanted to kind of give this image to you too. This was one that I found kind of interesting as well. I just wanted to share it with you. Remember the camera that I said was kind of an odd camera, and a lot of people wondered if it was a hologram camera because they were adamant about, they were supposedly in shock when Charlie Kirk was shot, but that camera in back of him that we never saw the footage, never even knew why it was there, was so important to remove. I thought that was really odd. I think everybody should probably think that was odd because it was. For some reason, this is not coming up. Here, let me grab this because I want to grab this for you so you can see it because I did find this to be strange for sure. Okay, let me see. Let me go back. I'm trying here. 1 second. Just chill with me for a second so that I can nab this for you. Okay. This image talks about Charlie. Talks about the camera. Okay, let me go over here. Let me grab this. Oh, we're just told so many lies, you guys. I'm just so tired of it. Okay, so let me grab this one for you. This was interesting, I thought. Here's Charlie. Okay, so here's this photo. See this camera right here? If you're watching on YouTube, see this camera right here? Interesting that this camera didn't get taken down. Only the one that was fixed in the back of Charlie. This camera they didn't care about. So if it was about the camera, and the camera was just a camera, they would have taken this one down too, but they didn't. They only took down the one in back of him. Okay. Just making a point. We have a lot of questions. We have a woman that's apparently not grieving and never crying, although she's dabbing her eyes a gazillion times. And you guys, I'm the first one that would have sympathy for somebody in a situation where their loved one was murdered in front of them, okay? And where the person has little kids to whose faces we have never actually seen, okay? I'm just making that point because it's true. We've never actually seen the faces of the kids. I do think Erica Kirk was his handler. I do think it was an arranged marriage, actually. I think that she was put into position to meet him, and I think that it worked. Maybe he found out. Maybe he was realizing it. I don't know. But something about his murder was still very strange. Now, keep in mind, it was only 3.5 months ago. 3 months ago. 4 months ago? October, November, December? 4 months ago. So why is she calling for a speeding up of the process? Why is she saying that, oh, he believed in the Constitution? But set that aside for just a moment as we try to progress this thing through very quickly. She's not really talked about him at all to this point. And 4 months is actually a pretty quick amount of time. We're talking about a very public execution that I'm still have questions about. Okay, we covered up the crime scene within a few days with cement. Our governor of Utah, because I'm in Utah, got on TV and you could tell he was lying. Okay. You could tell he was lying. In fact, it was so bad and so embarrassing that he actually almost couldn't even look at the camera. He had a really hard time, like even saying what he was saying, because I actually think that he didn't believe what he was saying. I'm looking for the comment right here. It was actually really, really weird. It was a comment that he made about, and then he changed clothes, and then he changed clothes, and then he changed clothes again, and then he was found in the clothes that he originally did the thing in. Even though you guys never saw a picture of him with the gun on the rooftop, you're supposed to believe he's the masked guy running across the rooftop. And then you're supposed to believe that he changed 4 times, even though he was pictured at, I think, like a Dairy Queen. He did it 4 times and then ran off into the field and then dumped the gun that he didn't assemble, then unassembled, and he dumped it in a field so people could find it. If he carried it in his backpack, which you can't see because the pictures don't show a gun in the backpack, because it was a very light, small backpack. There was no change of clothes and there was no gun in that backpack. If he could carry it in a backpack with him on campus, then why did he have to dump the gun? Why couldn't he have just carried it with him in his backpack after he disassembled it? How come there's no footage of him casing the joint to find out where to be? Because he only had 10 days notice that the event was actually going to happen. Why are there no gas receipts of Tyler Robinson driving up north, which is about 4 hours away, to actually go case the joint? Wouldn't there be videotape of him at a gas station, of him at the school? Yeah, we didn't see any of that. But Erica Kirk today is in the press, working hard, leader of Turning Point, didn't even catch a breath, leader of Turning Point, smiley, I've never seen her grieve to this point. Even the memorial was full of fireworks and everything else. Who does that? Not quite sure. Never with her kids, I guess, always in the press, and telling us that we should just rush the Constitution along and that this should just really finish for her. Even though the only comment she's really ever made about him is that she just forgives him. She doesn't forgive anyone asking questions about it, like Candace, but she does forgive the killer of her husband who was murdered in front of her. Never saw a autopsy, never saw a funeral, never saw, oh, well, there's so many things we never saw. Lots of questions. Never saw the truth of anything. And yet today, in the press, saying, it's only been 4 months. Can you rush this along? Wow. By the way, Tyler Robinson never actually admitted that he did anything. Are they threatening him, threatening his family? Sure. I firmly believe that. Tyler Robinson actually lives very close to where I live. Interesting. Think about all the things you didn't see. Did they get somebody in a chat room? Yeah. Did you ever hear any more about his roommate? No. The weird one? No. Okay. Did they tell him basically the world had framed him and the CIA had framed him and the world thinks he did it and so he won't be able to convince anybody? Yeah. Did I offer to interview the parents so they could just tell their real story? Yes. But they have been offered over $1 million from other people to tell the story. Now, a big warning to them would be, I wouldn't do that because they're going to spin it how they want. But there again, I don't control that. So there you go. But I did offer because they're from my city. I did offer because not that they would have ever chosen me. I'm a small town, small potatoes. I've been national for a number of years, but you know, I've been with the Alex Jones Show. I've been with Glenn Beck's The Blaze, but it's okay because I understand that there could be some money to help their son. I get it. I really do. I understand. But he has been railroaded into this for sure. He did not do it. And the security team was switched out the day of because they said they were there and chosen because they weren't doing anything that day. And then also smiled when they said that to a friend of mine, smiled and said, nothing ever goes on in Utah, with a creepy smile. The security team, the new ones, the new members, the guy that's taking the body to which there is no blood on anybody, taking the body, no blood on the ground, taking the body to the car. He's one of those guys in the flannel, the green and brown flannel. Something really wrong with this whole story, guys. And I'm the first one that would have said, oh my gosh, you know, something's up here. By the way, we need to, not be mean or not say anything about the grieving widow, but she's never been the grieving widow. I'm sorry. Something very wrong with this story. Her parents were DOD. She's in a lot of videos talking about all kinds of things, even grid down events. Okay. This is somebody very utilized by the deep state. So I think the marriage was a weird sham marriage. I really do. And I think that she was appointed the leader of Turning Point for a reason. Okay. Most people, when they lose their loved one, especially in front of them, like this, very young, right? Young family. You see people like this. I'm not saying every single person on earth has to have this reaction, but I would say most people would react and say, they can't even talk about it for months and months and months. I mean, it would be that horrific. You wouldn't be able to talk about it. Not her. She's on every show imaginable. That's all she does is away from her kids and talking about it. So there you go. So I just had to say that the Charlie Kirk thing was done for a number of reasons. Number one, to shift Turning Point into the major landscape, to grab sympathy and to get people into Turning Point, because I do think they're turning Turning Point, if you will, into a national purveyor of brainwashed thoughts on neoconism. I do. And anything that's going to be backed and funded by the billionaires is going to be in a position where it's controlled. So when Candace and Charlie were chosen as the two people to really be the face of Turning Point, you can bet your bottom dollar that they were there for a reason and that they were assets. Okay, Candace has brought forth a lot of truth, but assets sometimes do. That's just what their job is. They do. And I know it's hard for people to understand and believe, but it's the truth. You're never going to be positioned as a face of Turning Point with billions of dollars behind it, millions and millions of dollars at that point, without it being controlled. Okay? This is why my show will never be very popular in mainstream, because if I say these things, then people start to understand that the right media and the left media are both extremely controlled. I am not controlled. And therefore, I am telling you that it is so heavily controlled that if you have an audience of any substantial numbers, you are controlled or erased or diminished. One of the three. That's how it works. I was censored. I was taken off because I said too much. I questioned why Trump was running because he knew it was rigged. Why would you run? Well, then you'd have to be part of the club to do that. That's how it works. They're all part of the club. So today, you're seeing a lot of headlines, if you look at it like a stage play, it's so much easier to understand what's happening. We control all the governments of all the nations. We control it, hook, line, and sinker. Okay. And Israel's government controls us. We're in a partnership. Okay. We're also in a partnership with China, but no one wants to believe that because they've made them into our competing enemy. I'm like, yeah, BS. And also with COVID, it didn't come from Wuhan. It came from us. We placed it in Wuhan so it would look like it came from somewhere else. They always do that. And we orchestrated that, and they were clearly on board because we blamed them and they never said a word. That should have been your first clue. They didn't do any uprising against that. They didn't say, how dare you blame us when you guys know you did it? Well, it's because we're in partnership. We're in partnership. And there have already been the taking over of all the governments. And so for anyone to give a blank check and all their trust to any government at this point in time would have to be stupid. They would just have to be stupid at this point. Because I can point to you a million things we've discussed on this show that have given you the evidence to say that is true. We own the governments. We have cooed. We spent the 80s cooing South America. We spent the 90s cooing the Eastern blocks. We've spent a substantial amount of time, the CIA, not us, cooing the countries and putting our guys in. Why do you think Iran's any different? They even told you Operation Ajax happened and we controlled Iran. So if we controlled Iran, then we control them now. That's just how it goes. So when you see the headlines, which are so laughable at this point, I don't know how anyone can understand this, then, this is what we have. This is the problem we have. This is why I tell you things like, just make sure you have Saracenia purpurea, okay? I don't sell it. I'm just telling you to go get it because it can stop if they drop typhoid, if they drop things on us, smallpox that they still keep in the lab, the government lab, the army labs. Okay. There's a reason that they do, and they keep it alive and well. They can't keep any of the moon landing evidence, but they do have smallpox. What does that tell you? Come on. You're smarter than that. And I know you are. So anyway, Saracenia purpurea. You'd be really smart to have a bottle of that, a bottle or two to share with a friend. You would be really smart to have these things. And we'll just continuously be showcasing the things that we really need, the things that can help us. And by the way, I'm never going to give out all the things that we truly need to do on air. Why? Because that would be stupid. Because there are a lot of people doing a lot of things that I know about. And guess what? They're going to do them on the down low. That's never going to be publicized. If it's ever publicized, we have a problem. Okay. They want me to publicize stuff like that. Just like they want to call me a Jew hater. I'm like, are you kidding? Are you kidding? Really? We're still in that zone. I've never been that in my life. I don't hate a group of people based on their religion or based on their things. So I couldn't. Okay. By the way, get over to Cardio Miracle. It is so helping me. By the way, they have these bottles that are amazing when you order it. You get this. So cool. Look at this thing. It's so, oh, I'm sorry. It's right there. So cool. You can get Cardio Miracle. You can be taking that every day. I sip on it all day long. I love it because it's delivering vitamin D to your cells. Did you know that? Vitamin D. You need vitamin D. I promise you that with what's happening in our world right now. And you need a delivery system to your minerals that actually works. Cardio Miracle does that. That's why I talk about it on the show. Also, go to allfamilypharmacy.com. You know how I feel about pharma, but I do think you need ivermectin and fenbendazole and membendazole to get rid of parasites. This is the place to order it so you don't have to go find a doctor. You order it online, allfamilypharmacy.com/Kate. You're getting a percentage off and you're ordering it online. It arrives at your house in about 4 or 5 days. And I highly recommend that to you. Okay. I would go, if you want a more comfortable bed, I would go to mypillow.com and use the code word Kate. Their pillow toppers can change your mattress. You'll get better sleep, and their sheets are to die for. So I would do that. I also would get the remineralization deodorant and teeth whitener because you need remineralization for your teeth. 80% of the diseases start in the mouth. Remineralize your teeth. Your body grabs the minerals from your teeth. This is why people have teeth problems as they get older. It grabs the minerals from your teeth. This is why in pregnancy teeth have a problem because why? Because the baby's taking those minerals, okay? It's taking what it can grab because we're also deficient. Go to the links on my website, katedalleyradio.com, katedalleyradio.com, and get what I'm telling you to get, because I'm telling you, you need copper from FIQ. FIQ does the Recuperate Copper. They have it in stock right now. Don't go to Amazon and get it. It's out of stock. Go to the FIQ link where it says Get Copper on my website, katedalleyradio.com. It'll bring you right there and order up. If you're taking copper daily, it's going to tell the other minerals in your body what to do. You are going to feel healthier. You are going to be healthier. I promise you that. And so please do that. It's so amazing. Okay. And right now, by the way, I just wanted to let you guys know, I'm doing this like fasting 16 hours and then I'm not eating past 8 o'clock at night. So I'm basically fasting from the night before through sleeping all the way till the afternoon. I'm eating super healthy. And then at 8 o'clock, I don't eat any more food anymore. And then I go back into a fast, and it can really help the body. So just letting you know that it's important to do that for your body. And if you can go a couple of days without fasting, you will do a good fat burn, and you will also get those cells to regenerate if you do it on the 3 days. Okay. So just letting you know all of that. I so appreciate you. Thank you for all your comments. Be back tomorrow with Susan and Melissa. And then I'll be back on Thursday this week too. All right. Because I missed Monday. So, all right, you guys, share the show. I'll put up some shorts. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you guys. Be faithful, be fearless, and see you back here tomorrow for tomorrow's show.